welcome everybody to Masculinity Rising number 5. And if this is your first time here, know that my mission is to create a world where men can rise to their fullest potential. I strive to empower men to cultivate the strength, the power, and the presence so that they can become absolutely uncommon leaders, powerful leaders for themselves, for their families, and for the world. My ultimate objective is to create a movement, a community of absolutely uncommon men who embody physical strength, mental resilience, emotional intelligence, and are deeply spiritually grounded. And finally, through Masculinity Rising, I aim to initiate a movement so that men, women, children, and the world can really transform and experience that fullest potential. So welcome to this. We have Mary coming on today. So Mary is a mindset and cycle mentor who helps high-achieving warrior women accomplish more and feel less overwhelmed by using their menstrual cycle with deep intentionality. This topic is absolutely near and dear to my heart because I'm married to a warrior woman, the mother of my boy and the mother of our daughter who's arriving in July. And I think that I can speak for both of us both of us and both men and women, when I say that sometimes it can feel freaking impossible to like connect and get on the same wavelength sometimes. And I think of that. There's a meme from The Notebook where he's like, "What do you want?
It's so simple.
What do you want?" And I think that we've all seen it, right? and I think that we can all look at that and like relate to that, and that resonates in some way. Oh, there we go. Bringing her back. Sometimes things happen. There we go. You're back.
No,
you are back. Don't know what happened. It's modern technology, but we are here and it's awesome. We were just laughing about the meme.
I love that.
Of what do you want?
I mean, everyone
what do you want?
Nodding in agreement.
Yes, absolutely. So I was just saying that I think that I can speak for both men and women when I say that it can sometimes feel absolutely impossible to like communicate, to get through to your partner. And part of the thing that I think that we've dropped the ball on as a society is really recognizing that men and women, though we're the same, we're so biologically different, both in our biology, but also mentally and emotionally, the ways that we work. And that can lead to a lot of communication problems and a lot of sparks that can create fires in relationships and really make our lives harder than it needs to be. So I'm super excited to chat with you today and go deep into femininity on the feminine cyclical intelligence as well, so that we can really have a more harmonious world and get along more effectively and efficiently together.
Yeah,
so,
and also just to like preempt that we are talking about strictly a male and female partnership, and obviously there are other partnerships out there that are in a male and female body, but we're going to specifically speak to those that are in male, female, identifying as that. But knowing that hormones are influencing that, and we tend to only talk about hormones with the female cycle, but the male cycle also has hormonal influence. So I'm really excited to shed light on that today for you.
Yes. Oh man, I'm so excited to get into that. And yeah, we're talking about partnerships today that have a biological female, biological male together. But that's not to say that anyone else couldn't benefit from this, because there's going to be a lot to take away. And inside of every single relationship, you're going to have, because masculinity and femininity are energies, you're going to have a more masculine and a more feminine partner. And some of this stuff can really apply there too. And the better that you can recognize, like, oh, who inhabits which role more naturally, and the more that you can accept that, and the more that you can harmonize and really create a more powerful relationship. So I want to start with a little passage from David Dida's book, The Way of the Superior Man, that really got me excited. I know Mary got you excited when I sent it to you. I just put it in chapter 10 of my book about integrating the feminine as a man into your nature, and we cannot exist without it. But it goes like this: like the ocean, the native state of the feminine is to flow with great power in no single direction. The masculine builds canals, dams, and boats to unite with the power of the feminine ocean and to go from point A to point B. But the feminine moves in many directions at once. The masculine chooses a single goal and moves in that direction, like a ship cutting through a vast ocean. The masculine decides on a course and navigates in the direction. The feminine energy itself is undirected but immense, like the wind and deep currents of the ocean, ever changing, beautiful, destructive, and the source of life.
Mm-hmm.
End quote. So, Mary, what comes for you? What do you feel? What do you experience?
What do I not experience? It's what got me excited when I saw the passage that you sent was that I'm living a block from the ocean for just a few months right now. And I've been taking daily walks on the beach and meditating on the ocean waves coming in and out and just feeling so connected with that. And I'm noticing as I'm saying that it feels woo woo, right? It feels like too out there to talk about how watching the ocean waves makes me feel more at home in my body. Because I literally go through an ocean wave every month. And you go through the same ocean wave every day. And yet we minimize the power. So I heard power in there by trying to keep it static and linear and consistent as the man. But when I watched the wave come up on the shore, it doesn't come up as a straight line, you know, and as it's changing tides, so that's another word too, we're always changing and evolving. Um, Sometimes it comes up really far, and then sometimes it just wants to come up a little bit. So sometimes there's a small wave where there's just a little bit of energy, and then sometimes there's a really big wave where there's a lot of energy in it. And we see the male energy cycle as this certain type of power that society has put on it, where it's powerful because it's consistent and predictable on a day-to-day basis. But the woman has actually more hidden power behind it. It's like one of those waves where you're like, is it going to crest? Is it going to crest? Is it coming? Is it coming? And then it's like, bam, and it comes at you because it had just been building so much momentum. And yet those are the waves that the surfers want. You know, those are the waves that they look for, but yet they're also the most feared. So women's cycles in all this momentum that we build throughout on a monthly basis is feared, and then also needs to be revered because there's so much power in it. So take with that what you like. You know, when we talk in poetry such as this, it really challenges us because so much content on social media, this will just be my last thing here. So much content on social media is very factual, information driven. This is what it's looking like in my life. And there's a time and place for that. There's also a time and place for expanding your brain to see the connections of poetry and art and beauty and nature. So that's what I appreciated about you bringing that reading. And I think you have another one prepared to this conversation, because it's very rare that you get to spend time with that and really meditate with it instead of just kind of reading through and moving on with your day. Like let's stew in it.
Yeah, so much of our the way that we understand and process things is through story, which is rooted in in language,
Mm-hmm.
which is rooted in imagery. So it's why mythology is so powerful, and poetry, paintings, any artistic expression is so powerful, because we don't even have to explain it. As soon as you experience it, or you hear it, you see it, you process it, you experience it on an internal level. And reading through that, both you and I were like, I feel this in my own unique way through my own filters of perception. And then you brought it forward in such a really, really cool way, that men are going through this daily cycle, and it's almost as if it's the little waves washing up on this shore pretty predictably, but also each individual wave is a little bit different. Some are a little bit bigger, some wash a little bit higher. So things within our life seem so predictable, but there is a little bit of variation within there. And then when you see those big
Right.
100-foot surfing waves, it takes more time to build. It takes more time to build. They're beautiful, but they're also brutal in the amount of destruction that they can, or the amount of power and change and fun that they can bring as well. I think we're in such an interesting time in society where I see this wisdom movement, like what you teach, is really harmonizing with the feminine cycle, and also helping us as men to understand it here too. My wife went through your program, and it was awesome. It definitely changed things in our house. But I see this trend within our society just to treat men and women the same, and be like, you go girl, go work, just push, just grind, have another cup of coffee. And I think that can be really destructive to women, but then also to men, to reinforce that when we already have a hard enough time like slowing down, taking a break.
Well, because you're stuck in the masculine, and men aren't encouraged to embrace your feminine, because women are being encouraged to stay in our masculine. So that's why most women prefer the week and a half right after their period. It's their favorite time of the cycle. And then the week and a half leading up to their period is where most women hate it, because they have to, that's where we're encouraged to be in our feminine leading up to our period. And yet the world is saying, like, no, keep up, stay in that masculine. And then that's why we have painful periods, terrible moody PMS, lashing out, fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, you name it. And yet most women, when they take it to their doctor says, just, deal with it. That's just part of being a woman. And so we have to suffer silently. So conversations like this are really important for us, because we need to be seen and heard and rise up together, because even our own doctors aren't advocating for us. We have to now take the responsibility for ourselves. And it starts with conversations like this, so that we feel empowered enough to speak up for our cyclical needs, because the world revolves around your hormonal cycle. Your hormones are balanced because the world supports your hormones, but ours are not supported in any way. And we have to break out of the mold, break out of the masculine mindset, and into this feminine flow where rest is prioritized. But there's no productivity in rest, is there? Or is there? Right? Or is there? Right?
Well, is there?
There's
That's the question.
it's this, like, we're so addicted to productivity. We're so addicted to getting stuff done all the time on this consistent day-to-day basis, that we've forgotten to honor the monthly basis, the monthly mindset that is within the female cycle. It's kind of like, the the male cycle is like, hitting a hockey puck across the way, where it's just like goes really fast and then it crashes into the net, right? Whereas a woman is more like a wheel, where it's rounding about and it gains momentum and it gains steam, and it's kind of like a cog in a wheel in a machine, where machines last much longer, right? Because they get more time. That's why you get to rotate the tires, and take that metaphor how you will. But there's actually more longevity in that than the male model. So if we can really start to see the reverence of rest and the math and the feminine flow, that balance, oh, we'd have a whole new world.
Yeah. It it really touches me when you're talking about going to the doctor and the doctor being like, well, you're gonna have to suck it up, or being like, here's some birth control that'll level you out. And one, that's, we had a really fun time, we'll say, transitioning my wife off of birth control, which she started taking it early because she had migraines, and the doctors were like, well, maybe this will help you with the migraines. And I think that's a really common thing. We're going to have a daughter coming in July, and I've learned a lot of stuff about how birth control affects your health as well. So I feel very passionately about that, and really very passionately about helping women understand what is actually happening in your body. Because when Jen went through your program, I was like, why didn't I learn any of this? Like, going through health when I was supposed to learn this, why didn't I learn any of this stuff? And just like assume that men and women were exactly the same, that we could navigate our days, our lives, our months in the exact same way. So I want to give you a space to respond to that. And then after that, I would love to jump into dip our toe in the water with like your knowledge about the masculine cycle, like what we go through hormonally, but then also bringing in your unique artistic way of expressing it. And then I want to read that next poem and dive into the feminine cycle. So let's go.
Well, I love this. I get so nerdy, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain it quickly.
Nerd out. We have so much time.
What is time? There is no time. So the process of ovulation, when everyone was taught about it, was taught it in a way where it's very neutral. We learn about the male body in this like much reverence of like it goes through this fantastic process, and then you look in textbooks and how it explains the difference of women's bodies and what it goes through, and it's just nope, it goes through this and it goes through that and that's it. But there's so much reference to it, and it blows my mind. Like, that's why I just love my cycle so much, because I can't believe, I literally cannot believe that my body every month, at the beginning of my cycle, the brain, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, calls down to the ovaries and is like, yo, let's get an egg going. It's time. And eggs are like, okay, here we go. And there's like 15 eggs that all fight each other. And they're like, I want to be the one. No, I want to be the one. And then one is like finally chosen. And that egg is like, ha ha, I'm the winner. I'm going to start growing. And then estrogen steps onto the scene. And so this is where women start to feel very vibrant and outgoing. It's where I am right now in my cycle, where the verbal and social centers of the brain are ignited. And we want to be seen, right, by by a male partner. We want to be, fertile. That's this fertile time where the egg is getting ready and it's growing and maturing. And then it reaches the point where it's like, let's go, I'm ready. And ovulation occurs where the egg literally ruptures the ovarian wall. And then it travels through the fallopian tube in hopes that there's sperm waiting there, right? 9 times out of 10, a woman's like, look, I'm not having a baby every 9 months. So, like, I'm done. I've had 2 kiddos. I'm done. So the egg travels down, and there's hopefully like a nice little cushy uterine lining if it has been fertilized, and it can implant. And then here we have pregnancy, or it sees that there is no egg, and then the uterine lining is shed. And that process of when the uterus realizes, oh, there's no egg here that's going to be implanting, that is part of this death and rebirth process that our entire world goes through. And that is the piece of the cycle that is missing from the intelligence and the reverence of most women's experience of the cycle. Because when the body is preparing for menstruation, for that death, right, of the shedding of the uterine lining, this is when we have terrible cramps, bloating, headaches, migraine, cramping, moodiness. That is what I specialize in. So I studied psychology, clinical psychology for 4 years with the intent of trying to solve my PMS because I hated feeling nuts every month where I was lashing out, irritable. Like I would have the wind would blow like one little hair and I would freak the fuck out. I couldn't handle it. And I'm like, oh my God, is this just how it's supposed to be? That women are just supposed to be miserable every single month for X number of days for 4 decades of my life? That's what it means to be a woman? And it's what's happening is when women are experiencing those symptoms, it's because all month long they've been pushing through and trying to be a man, staying in that estrogenic state where they're like, oh, yes, let's go, because the world celebrates that. The world says, yeah, please give me more. Let's do it. Like you're producing, you're doing things, you're getting stuff done, right? We want to validate you by you showing me what you've done, right? We'll tell you you're enough when you're doing things. But yet, when the uterine lining is preparing to be shed in that death and rebirth cycle, you're slowing down. You're getting more in tune with yourself, with your emotions. You're nurturing yourself. You're not as outward focused. So then it's you feel selfish. You're not producing, but yet you are, because we need winter for summer. We need rain for sunny days, and we need the luteal phase. We need that premenstrual oomph. I'm just going to call it in order to have the estrogenic days. So there's my little spiel. Now I think you had a second question, but
Yeah.
I'll let you. What do you want to marinate on with that one?
I want to go deeper. I'm going to go deeper into it. But before that, what did you learn about the cycles that men go through?
So the male cycle is a 24-hour clock, the circadian rhythm, and then what I just described in roundabout language is the infradian rhythm, or the 28-day clock. So yes, women have the circadian rhythm too, but we get the luxury of having 2 clocks. Woohoo! We're special.
Yeah, 2 of them.
It's fun. It keeps things exciting. If we all had the same clock, it would be so boring, right? So let's celebrate the variety. And the male hormonal cycle, I'm just looking at my notes here. Basically, in the morning, testosterone is at the highest. So that's why everyone, women included, feel very energized. You hit the ground running first thing in the morning. You're very alert. And then testosterone wanes in the afternoon. So that's when you're more socializing, connecting with others, hence happy hour, where you're commiserating with everyone after work. And then the evening is when testosterone wanes. And that's where men are typically, like cocooning, where you're not really wanting to interact with your partner, but also women too, where we're just like, we're done with the day. We've been doing a lot of stuff. So we're just resting and cocooning in. Right. So that's what you go through, repeat 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. When you are at 9 a.m. in the morning, where you're alert, women are there in the pre-ovulatory and ovulatory phase. So it's a very similar experience. So we have that for about, right. So for about
throughout
a week.
The month.
So that's where I am right now. I'm at my 9 a.m. for a week. Right?
Yeah. So like that 9 a.m.,
right.
I'm ready to get shit done. I'm super productive. That's my high testosterone. And for dudes and women listening, we have higher testosterone, which drives, it gives us a drive for dominance and competition. And dominance is not like shove people down, but it's like who can get to this top of the social hierarchy, whether that's like physically wrestling, like we used to do in a tribal situation, or competing at work, or men have a very particular way of communicating and like verbally jabbing at each other, which is different than how women do it. For men, that's a way of bonding and like showing, oh, this dude will show up when we're in battle, when we're on the hunt. So that's when we're peaking that. And at your stage in the feminine cycle, that's when you're more likely to be able to do those things effectively, to play the dominance game, to play the competition game. And the funny thing is, when men compete for dominance, just in the social hierarchy, when we win, we get a little reward of serotonin, which is like, hey, feel good. And then when you do that, you also get another boost of testosterone. So it will increase your desire to compete and like establish yourself within the social hierarchy. If you're providing for your family, that means like getting promotions. If you're in sports, that's competing, whatever it might be. And the funny thing is that in primate research, they've found that whoever is at that alpha post, whoever's reached the top of the social hierarchy, has that super high testosterone because they compete and they win all the time. But the other thing is that they're not violent, they're not aggressive. That person at the top tends to be the one who is the most socially skilled. He creates the deepest connections and has the best relationships in the tribe. And it's actually the ones that are near the bottom who are competing and keep losing that get a peak in cortisol that brings out that violent aggression within males. So like that peak of testosterone is your time to like go. And for men, like if you're feeling that that stressed out irritability, that's a different thing. But so if we're talking about that testosterone from a masculine standpoint, that's your compete. And like when you do it and you succeed, you're going to feel great. And your woman is in that for how much time
around
throughout
like
her
a
cycle?
week to 2 weeks, depending. And the testosterone increases in our body as well. So I feel more resilient, more bold. I do things that I don't typically do any other time of the cycle. Verbal and social centers of the brain are ignited. So that's why I was like, yes, let's please schedule this during my ovulatory phase because we're in my 9 a.m. But then in the afternoon, when testosterone wanes for you, that's equivalent to the woman's like tail end of the ovulatory phase and the luteal phase, the beginning of the luteal phase. So again, that's about a week where we're in the afternoon and we're just kind of in this like it's starting to transition from the masculine to the feminine. The afternoon is the transitory period. And then in the evening, when your testosterone wanes, this is my favorite explanation, that when testosterone wanes for you in the evening, that's when you don't want to talk. You don't really want to do much. You just want to like throw on TV or whatever, read a book. And women are there in our premenstrual and menstrual phase, right? So that's about a week and a half that we're in this time of just not really wanting to interact. And I remember asking Brendan, he was in your program, and I remember asking Brendan once, I was like, Brendan, so look, I know it's 9 o'clock, you just poured some whiskey for the night, but like, would you mind getting your clothes back on and doing some of those things that you did this morning when you were washing the dishes, taking care of the girls, getting stuff ready for the day? Like, can you do that right now? And he was like, are you kidding me? Like, no, I'm going to sit down and hang out. And I'm like, yeah, that's what society does to women. For a month, for every month, for a week and a half, society is like, why aren't you at max capacity when your testosterone has waned, when your hormones are at the lowest point? Why aren't you in your masculine when you're in your feminine? Because there's just a total lack of ignorance and knowledge around what it's like to be in that flowing state, that nurturing state of being with yourself, of nurturing who you are and slowing down. It's so important. We need to have the expansion of the masculine and the contraction of the feminine. So the more that, here's a call to action, the more that women can lean into the feminine and embrace that time to slow down, the more that men can really feel into their own feminine, to be led by females, by their female partner. And it balances out the relationship. And I bet some of those communication mishaps will start to dissipate as we appreciate both how the masculine and feminine show up in the relationship.
Yeah, it makes me think of the poem that we read at the beginning. You know, the feminine is the vast ocean, powerful, flowing in any direction that she wants. The masculine is like a ship riding on that ocean. And we absolutely have to work together. We have to acknowledge that the other one exists. That like these are your waters and I'm floating upon the waters. You know, in our lives, we have to acknowledge that the feminine in the relationship is going through this cycle. One, she needs to open up to it. And the more that she can do that, and the more that we as men can cultivate the mental resilience, the emotional intelligence, the empathy, that heart feel, that heart connection, the more that we can work with her throughout the cycle rather than expecting her to be like us and like, cool, you're the same every day. She's not. The more that she can communicate that you can receive that and honor that, the more that you're going to get along. And then those moments of, what do you want? are going to be more bearable. Not saying they're not going to happen, because that would be expecting her to be masculine.
Exactly. We have to give permission for her to be in her feminine and to own your cycle. But it's so hard to own the cycle when you didn't even know how it worked until your wife went through my program. So how can you even own it if you don't even know how it works? So, you know, one other thing too with the circadian rhythm is that Brendan, my husband Brendan, he worked a second shift. So he would go into work at 2 p.m. and he wouldn't come home till like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, on repeat for years. And he basically was going against his hormonal cycle because he was having to do 9 a.m. activities at 2 a.m., you know? And so there was a whole slew of symptoms that he was dealing with. And he was more touchy, more irritable, low mood, low energy. And then 6 months ago, he started a 9 to 5 where he's in line and aligned with his cycle, and he's better. He has more energy. His mood has improved. He's less touchy with the girls. Like, if we can allow women the opportunities to do that, then the PMS, the painful periods, the hormonal disorders will go down, because we're allowing women the permission to support their cycles through their lifestyle.
Yeah, I remember my brother was working overnights for a while, and I was working with him, coaching him, and I was like, you got to try and get into natural light so that you can start to self-regulate. And I know that it's opposite because you're working at night, but like, you got to do that, and you got to honor what your body's asking you to do. And when you get home, to sleep when your body's asking you to sleep, rather than trying to grind through stuff. So looking at the circadian rhythm, the daily cycle, or the daily style. It's a style. It's a cool style. Men and women are going to wake up. They're going to have that higher testosterone peak in the morning, which is our get shit done time, which is why inside my program, I encourage my men to like get their work done early, to get it done as early as possible, because hormonally, that's when you're going to be more supported with that. And then we start to see things dropping off towards midday. We experience less desire to compete, less desire to establish that dominance within the social hierarchy, more of a desire to rest, and then even connect. And towards the end of the day, we want to sit down, throw our feet up on the couch and chill out. I had seen a study. I've also seen people claim that it's been debunked that men have about 7,000, or speak an average is like 7,000 words per day, whereas women speak an average of 20,000. And that by the time we get to the evening, we're mostly spent. But I like referring, or I like bringing in the hormones into it more. Whereas at the end of the day, like, we want to chill the F out and hang out. But your woman is going through that not just every day, but also throughout the entire month. Right. And we're in our society asking her to just like go. Well, just go. Just keep burning like the masculine fire, and just ignore what you're experiencing. And like you said, I think at the very beginning, that's where a lot of very uncomfortable period symptoms come from, is from neglecting that and like just trying to keep burning that fire, sucking down some more caffeine, trying to produce, be efficient, be effective.
But you can actually
and all
get
those things.
more done when you use your hormones to your advantage, but it's not popular. Not enough people are talking about it, and it's a skill set. Like, I was a chronic procrastinator. I'm a recovering perfectionist. So the idea of cycle syncing and only putting certain activities during my ovulatory phase, because that's when I'm at my peak performance, it took a long time for me to really practice that and embody that and live that. And, it one thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about just these transitions that we're going through hormonally is that it's very much like the seasons. So I'm in my inner summer right now. And then when I'm in menstruation, I'm in my inner winter. And I use those two polarities as an example because those are the most consistent seasons. It's pretty predictable that when you wake up in the summertime, you're going to just step outside your door and you won't need a coat. Whereas, and then every single day of winter, you need a coat. But when you're in the transitional seasons of inner spring, inner fall, some days are good, some days are bad. Some days you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's finally nice out. Like the first day of spring that we had last week, or a couple weeks ago, it's like, oh, it's so nice to not have a coat on. And then literally 3 days later, I was wearing my winter coat and hat again. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, I thought that we were in spring here, Mother Nature. And it's like, no, it doesn't. Transition isn't a clear cut, defined thing. And so inner spring is that week right after your period where you're gearing up towards ovulation. So there can be some, moodiness there, but most people don't know that. Most women aren't aware of that. But we always talk about the inner autumn, where that's the premenstrual, where there's just this transition as your hormones are declining. So very much like your afternoon to evening experience, where there's some days where Brendan comes home in the afternoon and he's spent. And then there's other days where he's like, had a great day. It was good. It's very similar to my inner autumn, where I have premenstrual phases where I'm like, I am joyful and happy and engaged until like the last day of my cycle, right before my period comes. And then I'm like, okay, my period is coming. Here we go. Everyone watch out. Right. And it's this transition. But because we're not even aware of what's going on, we don't even know how ovulation works. How can we possibly even know that we're in this transitional time where hormones are really impacting our mood and energy levels? So that's my mission. More women need to know it, because if you can advocate for what you know what's going on in your body. But even as I say that, Rob, I hear women's voices of like, but why do I have to learn this? It's ridiculous that the world doesn't even support this. Like, I didn't consent to being born in a female body that is prejudiced against, that is pushed down. We're expected to be this amorphous being that can just fit in wherever and force ourselves with more caffeine and just push through and be a man. We're a woman, and we have lost the meaning of what it means to be a woman. But there's so much trauma around it. We still just need to hold each other in that pain and anger and frustration that we're still being pushed down and told that our voices are not as powerful as men. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to bring in that
Mm-hmm.
second piece of poetry. It's a longer
Yeah.
one. And I think I like it because it's very primal, very visual. And that's why I decided to go with The Way of the Wolf for the name of this. And I think that we understand stuff so well, like we said at the very beginning, visually, mythologically, through stories. And so I want to chat on this and then really just talk about archetypally. You referred to the different phases in the cycle through archetypes. And I think that if we can dive into that more, both women can understand what they're experiencing and embrace it more. And also men can look at it and be like, oh, cool, this is where my wife's at in the cycle. And also have a better idea of like, well, this is what she needs from me. So let's dive into this thing. Let me get this thing pulled up here. So this really lit my heart up the first time that I read it, and I hope that you guys have a similar experience. And if you don't, I want to know about it. I want to know about it too. I want everything. You hate it? Great. Tell me. Love it? You're like, I want to know it. We have it in our hallway posted on the wall. Cool. Tell me. So, a wild woman is not a girlfriend, I added, or a wife. She is a relationship with nature. But can you love me in the deep, in the dark, in the thick of it? Can you love me when I drink from the wrong bottle and slip through the crack in the floorboard? Can you love me when I'm bigger than you, when my presence blazes like the sun does, when it hurts to look directly at me? Can you love me then too? Can you love me under the starry sky, shaved and smooth, my skin like liquid moonlight? Can you love me when I'm howling and furry, standing on my haunches, my lower lip stained with the blood of my last kill? When I call down the lightning, when the sidewalks are singed by the soles of my feet, can you still love me then? What happens when I freeze the land and cause the dirt to harden over all the pomegranate seeds that we've planted? Will you trust that spring will return? Will you still believe me when I tell you I will become a raging river and spill myself upon your dreams and call them to the surface of your life? Can you trust me even though you cannot tame me? Can you love me even though I am all that you fear and admire? Will you fear my shifting shape? Does it frighten you when my eyes flash like your camera does? Do you fear they will capture your soul? Are you afraid to step into me? The meat-eating plants and flowers armed with poisonous darts are not in my jungle to stop you from coming, not you. So do not worry. They belong to me, and I've invited you here. Stay to the path revealed in the moonlight and ride safely to the hut of Baba Yaga, the wild old wise one. She will not lead you astray if you are pure of heart. You cannot be with the wild one if you fear the rumbling of the ground, the roar of a cascading river, the startling clap of thunder in the sky. If you want to be safe, go back to your tiny room. The night sky is not for you. If you want to be torn apart, come in. Be broken open and devoured. Be set ablaze in my fire. I will not leave you as you have come, well dressed in finely threaded sweaters that keep out the cold. I will leave you naked and biting, leave you clawing at the sheets, leave you surrounded by owls and hawks and flowers that only bloom when no one is watching. So come to me and be healed in the unbearable lightness and darkness of all that you are. There is nothing in you that can scare me. Nothing in you I will not use to make you great. A wild woman is not a girlfriend. She's not a wife. She is a relationship with nature. She is the source of all your primal desires. And she is the wild whipping wind that uproots the poisonous corn stalks on your neatly tilled farm. She will plant pear trees in the wake of your disaster. She will see to it that you shall rise again. She is the lover who restores you to your own wild nature. End of quote.
Whoa. I liked hearing you read it.
It's a
Yeah.
different experience when you get to listen to it. So what came up for
What
you
didn't?
uh, individually and
What
in your work?
didn't? Oh, so good. It's interesting. I was literally just meditating today on thunderstorms. Uh, because there's definitely an awakening happening in the just in females in general as we talk more about our cycles and um yeah, yeah, more conversation is happening and more storms are brewing and they're all around, and sometimes there's thunderstorms that just pop up out of nowhere and you got to be guarded. But what I really love too was the rise again, restoration. I will heal you with the lightness and darkness. Um, the women's cycles are very similar to the phases of the moon. So I love that my cycle is aligned with the moon. I'm ovulating at around the full moon. When it's, the moon is full, it's very much how I feel. And when the moon is full, it's very light, right? It gives off a lot of light. I can walk on the beach and not need a flashlight because it's just illuminating everything in sight. It's full. But we don't hate the moon for then going back into its darkness, and it's still just as powerful, you know. We love the moon even when it's not full. And that lightness and darkness has to coexist. But when we're forcing women to stay in the full moon phase all the time, gosh, that is just a recipe for burnout, for a recipe for burnout in your relationship. So I loved that word too, that this is a relationship with nature. It truly is. I One of the reasons I love my cycle so much is that it helps me understand how interconnected we are to nature. And you're connected to the sun. We love the sun. Not only does it let us know, hey, it's time to start the day, and in the summer it warms us up, but we have to have the sun and the moon. But we keep our society is preferring the sun, so we need to bring the presence of the moon, and it starts in our intimate relationships so that it can ripple out from there. If we're not embodying it in our own way of being in our relationships, then how can we possibly change the world, right? um hmm, yeah.
So within that, within the cycle, because we've talked about it a couple of different ways. I know that you have
Hmm.
spoken of archetypes, blueprints, which we understand as like mythological
Hmm.
characters so often. And archetypes are really important because they're universal. They don't really exist unless it's something that applies across
Hmm.
many, if not most, cultures. So I know that you have talked about archetypes and really linked them up with each phase in the cycle. And I know that when Jen told me about them, I was like, oh yeah,
Mm.
that totally makes sense. I know exactly from my inner experience, at least, I know exactly what you're experiencing then
Mhm.
through that archetype. So can you tell us about
Mm.
that? You could start at full moon
Oh.
if you want
Yeah,
to,
I'm trying to think of which
and then go
example
from
I used in that
there.
course, because I have, pre-recorded modules, and my knowledge and embodiment is always shifting, right? And I actually
Mm-hmm.
I identify mostly with the seasons. I think that's the easiest that we can connect to, because we typically have seen most of how the seasons are. Um, I'm just speaking for some of my clients who lived in areas of the world where they didn't have like the full winter experience. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and personally, in my own just reflections and journaling, I've been thinking about archetypes because when I'm in my ovulatory phase, estrogen, which, like I said before, most women prefer that time because that's when you feel most yourself. But there's the myth, there's the lie kind of underneath it that I fed into for a very long time. which was like, no, 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 it's just an expression of me. The ovulatory
Mm.
phase where, um, you know, you're more flirtatious or you're more outgoing or you're more talkative. It doesn't mean that the luteal premenstrual version of you is less than. It's equal to. And, and I think if you can find your own relatable character, that's good. Movies are a great way to find something that's relatable. I've even named, yeah.
Can I jump in? So yeah, that's our summer, right?
Yeah. Inner summer.
Yeah. And we love the summer. We are so attracted to the summer and just the fun, the energy, the vitality, all the crazy cool stuff that we can do. And one of the things I talk about in my program that I also learned in men's sexual mastery and Kim Anami's work for men is that when they've done studies on it, they've done studies at strip clubs with men and strippers, the strippers who are ovulating will make more money than any of the rest of them. And the ones who are taking birth control will make the least because they're blocking the hormones, and men pick up on this. And when your woman is in summer, like, you are gonna want her, you won't be able to explain it, but she is gonna fill you with that life force that it's like a cup of espresso is not doing it for me right now. It's not the right analogy, but like, she's gonna fill you with lightning and inspire you, one, to want her, but to like go tackle the world for her and with her. And I think that the poem really does a great job of this because it's culturally, societally, we are addicted to the productivity, that electric lightning bolt, that sexuality, that just good feeling. We want it all the time. So we're like, I'm just going to push. But when you're in relationship with a female, you're going to feel that in her summer. You don't even have to know that she's there because your body's going to respond to her hormones, to her pheromones, the real thing, to her energy. And I think that so often we get addicted to that and we forget that, similar to what you said, she is that, and she is the rest of her cycle too, rather than like, oh, she is this person, this mythological being, this mythological summer that I want the summer her all the time, but I don't want the rest of her. Like, no, she is a relationship with nature. Can you love her when she is shining, radiant, glistening in the moonlight, and when she's got the blood dripping from her lips in that full-on wolf mode? So that is the summer. And I think that just knowing that like, one, she's gonna be more attracted to you. So like, if you're gonna get it
She's
on,
gonna demand
you gotta know you gotta know, she's gonna want that. And two, you have to know that like, she's gonna go through that cycle, gentlemen. You're gonna want her, and also that is who she is, and she is everything else as well. And you have to learn to love her for her full feminine cycle, the rest of her cycle, not just that short period that she's in her summer. So after summer, we're transitioning from the 2 points that you already laid out. From summer, the peak energy and intensity and like just passion, to peak winter, which is that like totally turning in, totally healing, totally recovering. For us, dude, that's midnight. We're asleep. We're out. So that transitional from summer to winter is fall. But what is happening? What is she experiencing? And how do we know as men that she's going into that next stage in the cycle, into that fall, which is necessary for the next harvest season and the
you
next
need
summer?
to have winter. You need to appreciate winter, because if you keep waiting and being like, I'm so done with winter, then when spring finally arrives, you're kind of like, it doesn't feel as sweet because you complained about winter the entire time. And and the fearing the shifting shape was another thing that really stuck out to me. But what I was saying earlier with the archetypes, one of my like archetype is I name my inner critic that emerges during the premenstrual. There's something about hormones declining that makes women very sensitive and vulnerable. It kind of opens us up, which is interesting of a metaphor because in the follicular phase, it's a very opening time, right? Full moon. Whereas the luteal phase, when hormones are declining, you're kind of contracting, but yet there's this opening at the same time. It has to be that balance. And our heart just gets a little, we overthink, we ruminate, we read into everything. We're very sensitive. And this, so I've nicknamed that name, that voice that comes out that like picks me apart. And it sounds very similar to voices from my past. So sometimes I even call it that, but I call her Nancy. She's just a nitpicky Nancy, but you can pick your own name. And there was something else I wanted to say. One thing that I ask of my husband when I'm in that phase is I preempt with that, hey, look, Nancy's a little loud today. Can you just hear me out? I could use just a little extra reassurance right now. Am I overthinking this? I'm feeling triggered. My triggers are they're more easily available during that time, which is actually very healing. Like a lot of women, myself included, hate that. We don't want to feel sensitive. That's a really hard thing to do when we're watching our male counterparts have the testosterone that helps them feel resilient. That's why I love my ovulatory phase, because my triggers are like, man, they could just roll off my back so much easier. But in the premenstruum, when our triggers are just more easily accessible, that's when you get to lean on the strength of the masculine to really guide you through that process. And if you can respond to that masculine call to just help us through it, then the fruits of the cycle will be so much, like you said, the harvest will be so great.
Yeah, so in that fall, it sounds like, from our perspective, where we can expect you to be a little bit more like self-critical and have that come out in different ways. And I imagine that shows up as like self-doubt and indecision in some ways as well. Bringing us back to the Ryan Gosling meeting. What do you want? What do you want? And yeah, expecting that, like, cool, this is men, I imagine that you've experienced this, like, I'm hungry but I don't know what I want to eat, and you're going through all the options.
Yeah.
And your wife, your girlfriend, whatever, is like, yeah, no, I don't want any of them. And you feel frustrated, but from a hormonal standpoint, like there's deeper things going on. And if you can honor that, like, cool, she's in her fall right now, here's kind of what's going to happen. Like you talked about, when we transition right now, we're in the transition from winter to summer. It's going to be 60 degrees one day. It's going to be freaking great. In your woman's life, she might feel awesome one day, and they're like, oh, it's 30 degrees outside today. It's freaking raining. And in your woman's cycle, like from one day to the next, as she's in transition, like this could happen. There's going to be more fluctuation.
Yeah.
Am I hearing you right on that?
For women, we have a lot of shame that we're still healing on that inconsistency. But I think I said earlier, you have to adopt the monthly mindset as a woman. That's the flexible approach. That's the feminine approach. That's embracing who you are as a woman and accepting that there is this transition. And the sooner that you can consent to that, because you didn't consent to being born a female, you didn't consent to being born, you just were, and you're not going to consent to death, you just will. But if you can consent to the smaller pieces of your life experience between birth and death, oh baby, it is going to be so much easier. I'm not saying it's going to be a walk in the park to get there, and they can coexist. You can hate the transition and appreciate it at the same time. They can coexist.
There's something to be said about contentment. within that. But for the man, for the masculine in that relationship, this is your opportunity, one, through the work that you've done to become physically strong, mentally resilient, emotionally intelligent, empathetic, connected. This is your opportunity to step up and to hold that ship stable, that sailing on the seas, to hold steady within the relationship, in the household, knowing like she's in the fall right now. This is nothing personal for her or for me. And this is my job to hold everything together. This is the role of the masculine within society, within our relationship. So then as we transition from fall towards winter, what can we expect for inner experience as the female, and then outwardly, like how do we see that as the male, the masculine within the relationship?
What I'm hearing is a reverence for nature. That's what your poems highlighted so beautifully. It's a call to experiencing that unity around us, that we're not separate from nature. Just because we are human beings with a higher consciousness and self-awareness, we're not that different from my cat that has emotions. You know, like, we're not that different from the ocean waves coming in and out, but yet we think that we're separate and superior. And as your poem beautifully demonstrated, you know, the woman brings nature into your home, and it's a great call on both parts for the man to accept it, and it's easier when the woman can accept it. So when I learned about my cycle and I learned how to communicate it with my husband, it made it easier for him to respond to that. And on a tangible level, food is Brendan's favorite way to support me through my cycle. So when he'll say like, "Oh, are you in the Ides of Newt?" is what we call it. You have to have like nicknames for these different phases, otherwise it's just like you get the society stereotype attached to it. So you got to make it fun, you know. And he's like, "Oh, you're in the Ides of Newt. Oh, you usually have this kind of food. I'll make you that." And then when I get my period, he's like, "All right, I'm running out to get some burgers. I'll be right back." And he always makes sure I have all my red meat because, oh my gosh, that I think it's the iron is just so good for your body, and I always feel just so much more rejuvenated after I've had red meat. I know obviously there's food choices for women who may be viewing, but looking into cycle syncing your food and having certain foods to support what is going on with your hormones during that time is really good. I mean, you don't eat a really big meal before you go to bed, right? So it's the same kind of idea that you're going to want to eat certain foods during certain times of your cycle, as well as exercise. You know, if you are seeing that your partner feels pressured to keep up with her exercise regime and she's on her period, a gentle reminder, hey, you're allowed to take it easy, because she might struggle with giving herself that permission to slow down. And there's a lot of power in the masculine giving us permission to lean into our feminine.
Yeah, I yeah, as you approach the winter, we can expect then, from what I'm hearing, that the physical activity to need to come down a little bit to honor where you're at in your cycle. And I really liked when I had heard of the U.S. women's national team, the soccer team, using tracking their cycles to plan their training programs around it, really honoring that. And so often in our house, like, cool, I'm addicted to my summer wife. I expect her to like have the same productivity month round, and that's what creates conflict, and that's what creates disconnection in our relationship. So it sounds like that's when that physical energy is going to be the lowest, and the best thing that we can do is like give her permission to be like, hey, I'm got the kids right now. If you want to go take a nap, that's cool. Or like if she's beating herself up about not being on her program, her training program, whatever, like take the week off. Like, it's cool. Do some gentle yoga, get in the bathtub, take a bubble bath. What do you need? But unless we're able to communicate that, it's hard to do it. Is there anything mentally, emotionally that we should know as men that could come up during that time that we could be more supportive of, or that by knowing we could show up?
Yes and no. Um, I think I smile because I hear a call for your own emotional intelligence. I think if you're paying attention to every little nuance that your female counterpart is going through, it might drive her a little crazy. Where she's got her own thing that she's working through, and she has that power and authority and empowerment to speak up for her needs. And in you as a man focusing on understanding your own moods and how to process through those
Mm.
emotions, mm, you'll know how to respond. Um, yeah, yeah. The more that I've learned how to process my emotions, then that helps me be a better mother. So I don't read books on, how to help a toddler through emotions. I start with myself. So it always starts with you. Yeah.
Self leadership, as I call it. You can't put taking the words out of RuPaul's mouth, repurposing them. If you can't lead yourself, how the hell are you
Amen.
going to lead anybody
Whoa.
else?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not to minimize giving more advice and things to do, but
Yeah.
yeah, it starts with you and knowing yourself. The more that you know yourself and how moods interact with who you are, and how they help you express yourself, I think you'll feel a deeper unity with your female counterpart because of that.
Yeah. 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 And dudes, if you want more education on that, I'm always, always, always here for it. But beginning to develop a relationship with your own emotions, to express them even through journaling. And then I teach emotional freedom technique tapping, using after pressure to calm your amygdala, your fear and stress center, so that one, you can speak this stuff, two, you can release the
Mm.
emotion in your body and move forward constructively rather than emotionally and reactively. The more you can do that in yourself, the better that you can show up in your relationship, and like we were talking about, like
Mhm.
hold the ship steady as she's going through different things within her cycle. um, and then as we get into the spring, what, if any, changes can we expect as we move from spring? Things start to bloom, things start to blossom back into the summer, which our culture is addicted to, and which men get addicted to. When we were like, cool, I'm going to marry this woman, I'm expecting her to be summer all the time. So what can we expect in that final transition from winter towards summer
Every inner
and spring?
spring for a woman is different. So I can speak on my own embodiment of it. Um, when I emerge from my period, I really lean into rest. So that's a really big key focus, call to action for women as well as men, to just allow your body to slow down. And then I always emerge like, holy shit, I'm ready to go. And I can just see my vision so clearly. That's what's so beautiful about inner spring, where the buds are blossoming, they're emerging from the ground. And just this past cycle, I was like, yes, finally, my period's over. And I celebrated it with a nice little face mask. And I was like, aha, yes, I've ended one phase. I'm into the next season. And then the next day, my mood dropped. Like winter came back and it was like, you didn't pace yourself. And it was this powerful reminder from my cycle to pace myself, that when we feel that call from our hormones to be like, yes, let's go. And you want to just really lean into that energy, um, take precaution. Because if you go too far and you run too far with it, it's a recipe for burnout. So that's what I love about my cycle, is that it teaches me how to pace myself, that we can't just like the hockey puck, go, 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 crash into the net.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be more like a wheel where we gain momentum and then slow down at the end. Like that's a much more cyclical process is the word that came to me, but much more balanced. So I don't know if I answered your question, but spring is unique to every woman. I've worked with women who, if they've experienced traumas, especially inner child, inner teen is wounded, just whether that's sexual traumas, emotional traumas, those can reemerge in the inner spring because you're very much like a toddler in that time where there's just this newness of energy. And it reminds you of those times when you were younger, when you had that fresh energy. So those wounds can be reopened. So that's something to be aware of.
So there can be things
Yeah.
from the past coming up.
Mhm.
All right. Well, is there any advice, practices that are relatively simple that women can walk out with today and start practicing, and that men could be aware of and even helping with?
So I run a podcast, and if any of my listeners are on here right now watching this video, you'll roll your eyes at me because I say it in practically every single podcast. Good. I want you to hear my voice in your head. I'm kidding, but chart your cycle, girlfriend. Chart your cycle. And don't lean on your app to tell you what's going on in your ovaries, because no app or computer can guess what is actually happening with your egg and the process of ovulation. There's something really beautiful about building that relationship with your cycle, owning your femininity, owning your power as a woman by allowing your cycle to communicate to you, right? A relationship is a two-way street. And the way that our cycle communicates to us is through things like cervical mucus, your temperature, so basal body temperature, LH testing or ovulation strips, as well as cervical position, and then, of course, mood and energy levels. So when you can really focus in and allow your cycle to speak to you through those four biomarkers, as well as your mood and energy levels, and jot them down every single day, even if you don't feel like it, I promise you, when you take that time and put the time into understanding how your hormones are influencing you and how your body is speaking to you, we are in an epidemic of disconnection from our body. That is why we are struggling in our lives, because we've lost touch with how our body is interconnected. We are in our body. So if we allow it to speak to us and jot it down every day, 2 to 3 months minimum, that's all you need. I did a very intense study of my cycle for about a year. Like I went really into it, like wrote a lot down. You don't have to do it to that extreme. 2 to 3 months, and you will know yourself in a whole new way. And then your relationship with your partner will be enhanced tenfold just by you taking a minute each day to jot down what's going on inside. That's it.
Awesome. Track your cycle.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on the app. Get into your body. And I know when Jen was going through your program, she was tracking it. We had the paper out, and it was super helpful for me because we could have conversation on it each day. And then after a while, I kind of just knew where she was at, based on, like, I know this is how Jen shows up in the world when she's at this phase in her cycle. And that just made our relationship so much more harmonious, really. And it made it easier for me to stand up and like hold the ship steady as a man, and be that rock for the waves to wash over, and still be there, hold everything together.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you. One final question for you, or two really. One is, what is an unusual habit or absurd thing that you love in your life?
Absurd?
Yes. Well, it's pretty relative. And I recognize that both you and I are already uncommon people. So, like, almost anything that we could do could be unusual. But what comes up for you?
I don't know, Rob. Say the question one more time.
What unusual habit or absurd thing do you have or keep in your life?
It's an interesting question. I'd have to give it more time. Something quirky about me that I enjoy. I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know if it's quirky. It's a tough question, Rob. Yeah.
you can think on it. You
I
can
mean,
let me know.
honestly, Rob, I love my
I
cycle.
think
Like, I
this,
think that's so quirky. Like,
yeah,
I talk
there you
about my
go.
cycle in every conversation, and it's probably bizarre to the person on the other end. Like, I
Yes.
talk about it with my father. I talk about it with my grandmother. I talk about it with strangers when I'm at the cash register buying brownies for my period. I say to the cashier, "This is for my period," and they're like, they don't know how to respond because I just love my cycle so much. It's that's what's
Mhm.
quirky about me, I guess, because most people aren't at my level, and that's why I'm trying to rise up more so that I don't feel
Yeah.
alone.
I think that we can begin to
Yeah.
normalize it again, because I imagine that in a tribal situation where you had a circle of women around
Mm,
you, that it was a common thing. You didn't
yeah.
have to talk about it; you just kind of knew. But we've shut it down and masculinized women so much that it's kind of, it feels awkward when it comes out. But that's a
Yeah.
totally unusual, quirky thing that is absolutely amazing. That people are going to be like, "Cool, I want to do that too." Final thing is, where can women and
Mm.
men, where can we find you? Get
Two ways.
more of your work.
Fertilityawarenesspath.com, because your path with fertility awareness is unique to you. I also have a podcast, Menstrual Mental Health. It's on Spotify and Apple.
Awesome.
Thank you,
All
Rob.
right.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here,
Mhm.
Mary. So excited. And
Yeah.
well, have an amazing day. Everybody, thank you for being here again as we close this thing up. This is a value for value thing. This is an 8-week project to start,
Yeah.
but I think we're going to keep going with it. So, value for value, all that I need from you is to like this, to share this, to comment, because then I know that you're getting something out of it. Because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Don't want to waste Mary's time. Don't want to waste anybody's time. So, thank you again for being here. Value for value, like, share, comment, all that stuff. And we'll see you
Bye.
next week.